you see it?
Got it.
Okay, well, perfect. Danny, thank you so much for that introduction, and even for having us here to host this conversation on environmental justice and kind of helping connect the dots of what we've been seeing in the streets with so much activism, and where we're trying to move in this sustainability movement that the Green Business Partnership is so deeply involved in. So thank you and your team for having us. Thank you to Rosa and the Department of Environmental Conservation for joining us, because they're really the experts that Danny is alluding to. So Alex and I are not full experts in environmental justice. I would call us experts in community improvement or community understanding. We've spent a lot of time understanding underserved communities and populations of color and providing them with access through what we consider a very important component of community development, which is workforce development. We spend a lot of time understanding how we can help people advance in their careers and help them emerge in new industries. We do construction training, sustainability training, energy efficiency training, and really try to help people move into a higher station. And so that's how we view community development in a very holistic way. And we want to be able to tackle those issues with our partners. And we do a lot of work with minority-owned businesses. We help them get their minority women business enterprise certifications. And we want to be a part of building strong communities through this collaborative effort. So as you see at the bottom, what we believe is the keys to a thriving community are the collaborative relationships between people, businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies. That you really do need a full team approach to be able to tackle some of these issues that we are facing. And climate change is definitely no different. Many people, I'm sure people on this call, consider it one of the largest threats, if not the largest threat facing our world. And it requires an all hands on deck approach. And so this conversation around environmental justice is really to underpin the fact that we need to make sure that we are including people in the conversation who haven't always been included in that conversation. Because if we want to make sure that we're addressing these issues, we need everybody on board, and we need to make sure they understand where they fit into this larger conversation, and also how they're going to participate as we move forward. And so I'm excited to have Alex talk a little bit more about the concept of environmental justice as we move forward to this presentation. Off on mute.
I don't know why I can't. Everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Put on mute. Thank you for that. All right. So again, to Dwayne's point, right? I mean, we are currently in a situation where it's a pivotal moment in human history where we literally are fighting for our survival, right? And this is all due through climate change, a lot of which can be said is caused a natural cycle, but a lot of it has been accelerated with human activity. And that's something that is what we're discussing here, and how to get in front of this situation, right? One of the in the way we're going to be able to drive this, again, to Dwayne's point, is through environmental justice, okay? And to be able to continue this conversation, I would like to be able to read to you what the definition that the Environmental Protector Agency has provided as what this means. Okay, environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with the respect to development, implementation, and enforcement environmental laws, regulations, and policies. To reiterate, it begins with fair treatment and involvement of all in respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws. This is exactly what we want to talk about today. And to really encapsulate this sentiment, I would also like to read Dr. Brouillard's quote, an award-winning author of 18 books, that is considered to be the father of environmental justice. Environmental justice embraces the principle that all people and communities have a right to equal protection and equal enforcement of our environmental laws and regulations. America is segregated, and so is pollution. Race and class still matter and map closely with pollution, unequal protection, and vulnerability. This is a powerful message that illustrates the reality of what environmental justice truly is, where the whole community has the right to equal protection and equal enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. We must stop the segregation of pollution, and furthermore, the opportunities that that come with the transition of the clean energy economy. We believe that again, to be able to accomplish these goals, we can utilize the triple bottom line. And this is something that Van Jones, that has been a leader in this space, has articulated very, very well and made very popular, that true gains and true profit doesn't just come from thinking about the economic gains, but it truly comes from focusing on environmental gains, which make sure that we're getting clean energy, using renewable energy, and the resources that we're using are efficient. That is also meeting social needs, right? That is just, equitable, and all-inclusive. And again, the economical needs, again, of being transparent, responsible, and having sustainable growth. By not implementing this triple bottom line, we're going to make vulnerable, we're going to have vulnerable communities, again, fall prey to these advancements and not be able to participate. And Dwayne will be able to really be able to unpack this a little bit further.
Oh, thank you. So as Alex just mentioned, Dr. Bullard is one of the first that I learned of who studied this issue in depth. And he had a study that he did from 1987 to 2007 called Toxic Waste and Race at the 20. And it was a very interesting study. I didn't get to dive into all of it. It's very comprehensive. But what he basically was finding, and what has been found, is that our air pollution, our toxic exposure, all these things are having negative impacts, and they can be directly linked to race, even more so than economic status. That race is kind of one of the big determinant factors in terms of where pollution is and where some of the toxic sites are. So air pollution, statistics have shown that 66% more air pollution is found in communities of color. And I think another study was actually showing that about 56% more of that is pollution that they didn't actually create. So it's coming from other sources other than what's being created within the community. That exposure to particulate matter and that pollution in the air makes African Americans 3 times more likely to die from that exposure to that pollution. The big one that he found, again, through studying this research, and it's kind of one of the first big studies on this, was they were putting, the treatment plants, the power plants, the incinerators, all these things in poor and communities of color until, this social justice movement came around, this environmental justice movement came and started holding them accountable and started measuring and quantifying and holding the data. But they were finding that more than half of the people who live within 1.86 miles of toxic waste facilities in the United States are people of color. And these things are having increased rates of things like asthma, lung disease and lung cancer, heart disease, and potentially, the studies are not complete yet, but COVID-19, which we've seen has ravaged the Black community in higher numbers than any other, is potentially due to underlying respiratory issues that were already latent in people and is now being exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there's a potential correlation there that I'm sure more studies will lead us to. So you can see the environmental and social components that Alex mentioned. And then as far as the energy costs, you're seeing the economic factors where as a percentage of their income, Black households pay upwards of 3 times as much for energy as what studies are showing. And by dollar, it's not that much, but in relation to income. So that's a kind of race meets economic opportunity conversation, but definitely a way that we can start educating the communities about how they can lower consumption, lower costs, and really have this conversation about how we can drive this initiative.
Thank you, Dwayne. And on this slide here, again, it goes to show that it's unfortunate that the people that are least to blame for the current environmental conditions are the ones that suffer the most. And what it's showing here is that it's a direct correlation, again, of utilizing a dirty, inefficient energy source called oil number 6. And this is something that we use to heat our buildings. And what the map is showing is the blue dots here are the concentration of buildings where this oil number 6 is being used. The different color contrast where you have the darker colors are showing where you have the buildup and the concentration of this particulate matter that usually embeds itself into people's lungs, right? And then this leads to respiratory conditions like asthma, and could also lead to heart disease and cardiovascular episodes, right? And again, this is a direct correlation of how pollution, right, and the use of these dirty fuels, again, correlates to the health of the community, right? And if you take a look, there's a big chunk of Harlem and the Bronx that obviously are impacted by this. And again, there's no surprise that the correlation there of these health issues are there, right? So the good news on the other end of this is that being that this has come to the foresight come to the front end of things, is that there's going to be a large opportunity, an enormous opportunity for people to make the changes and implement these changes that are coming, right? And in order to mobilize the labor force that is going to be needed to be able to modernize the system, it's going to take more people, right, or a bigger labor force than we did it back in World War II. I was highly surprised when I heard this point. But in order to, again, to get to that level of mobilization, it has to be an all-inclusive opportunity to be able to have all communities get involved in this transition into this space.
Absolutely. And what Alex is saying is that representation matters, that it needs to be an inclusive discussion, and you need people who have the interests of these communities sitting at the table when certain decisions are being made. In the 40s, 50s, when some of these power plants were being placed in communities of color, they weren't in the city planning meetings, the zoning meetings, legislative meetings to really have a say in how that was being broken down. And we're seeing it, unfortunately, still play out today. And so this was a study done by an organization, what's called Green 2.0 study, came out of the University of Michigan in 2014, and they just had an updated one in 2019 that showed virtually no change. So from 2014, this was a more comprehensive study that showed that people of color make up about 36 to 38% of the US population, but hit a ceiling at 16% of the staff in organizations in which they surveyed. And I think it was 191 environmental organizations, environmental conservation organizations, like 70-something government institutions, like another 28 grant-making institutions, all focused on environmental change. And so they were seeing that there was not broad representation across these various industries. And so that failure to really recruit, hire, and promote people who have maybe a different perspective or a different tie to certain communities has shown that there could be potential issues, again, with representation at those levels. And so what they were seeing is that at the intern level, you would sometimes have closer to representation. If there's 36% of the population, you would have them as internships. But once you got to leadership roles and board position roles, there was significantly less people of color having a say in some of the decision-making processes. And so that's part of the environmental justice approach that needs to get reversed, is how do you make sure that when you're at meetings, and many of the people that are on this call participate in high-level meetings about sustainability, how do you make sure that you're including people in the conversation who also have a vested interest in making sure that this is really a collective effort?
Definitely, and to these numbers, these illustrate exactly what Dwayne is saying about the disparity between the population that exists and opportunities that each of these demographic are able to take advantage, right? So here what it's saying, at the New York State population, we're at 55%, I'm sorry, of whites, 19% of Latinx, 17 Black, and 19% of Asian. But the issue here is that you can easily identify is that the majority of opportunities, or the majority of employment that is being taken advantage of, again, and being used is used by the white community, right? And now the Latino has a better ratio, I guess, of joining the workforce and in this space at 17% on average. And then the Black community, we're on across the board, we're about 7%, right? In the Asian community, we stay around 6%. So again, the correlation there continues to show that even though these opportunities, and there's a lot of good intention around this, around bringing these jobs into underserved communities, the LMI community, as they say, it still has not happened, right? And again, to the conversations that we want to continue to have, and again, being transparent and honest about it, is to show that this is continuously the trend, right? And that's why we're here, and we really want to be able to start figuring out different ways to really change these numbers and make them much more balanced, so everyone again could benefit from a fair salary and work in a career that best benefits them, right? And is meaningful. This is the one beautiful thing about being in this space, that we get to do something that is meaningful and is actually exciting to be in this space. And one of the things that obviously needs to happen, and one of the biggest pain points that we constantly hear from employers, and we read in these reports, and again, and even in the NYSERDA Clean Energy report, again, one of the things that's keep brought up is the unskilled workforce, because there hasn't been enough programs out there. And if they are, the programs are out there, they're not reaching the ears and the attention of those, and again, in parts of the community that we're talking about, that we want to bring them into this space. So this training that we have here is a training that we're currently running, right? The mastermind behind this is my other partner from its other organization, Envivolution One, Antoine Cannon. He developed this about 10 years ago, where he saw an important opportunity in being able to provide individuals with not only the theory, but the hands-on training, by also going out there and providing these free energy audits to the business community, right? And what's wonderful about this is that it creates a win-win approach, right? Because participants get not only the theory, the level of experience that actually leads to them get the job, but by us going out and doing these energy audits and offering this information to the small businesses, we're actually generating a demand for that labor force to continue to implement these services, right? So this training came about and was funded through NYSERDA. Again, that agency has been godsend, I would say, for us to be able to continue in this space. And we've been able to train about 120 individuals, even through the COVID space. Prior to COVID, we actually were able to boast about a 90% placement rate. Post-COVID, we still are getting some placements, obviously not as high, but we're really ready. We have the pipeline and ready with the talent that's needed to be able to satisfy some of the labor demands that are coming. And the last point I'll leave with you here is that the training, what we try to do here, again, what we do here is provide a participant with the understanding of their ecosystem, the role they're going to play in this space, and also an understanding of where the opportunities lie, so they know how to pursue them. And that's why we teach the lighting system and we teach HVAC, because the bulk of opportunity here in our state lies on the energy efficiency space. So again,
yeah.
Yep, thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you, man. So as Alex could tell, or as you could tell, we're excited about this program. We've been running it since January, when I sort of funded it in December. We've trained 120 students in a 7-month timeline that was supposed to take 16 months, I think they gave us. Because people have been in front of their computers during COVID, we've been able to do 60 hours in 2 weeks of training and really get people prepared for this industry. And as Alex mentioned, it is students from all different types of backgrounds. As they like to say, or we like to say, we train students from Yale to jail. We have people that are, re-entry from incarceration. We have people that are veterans. We have people that are disabled. We have people from NYCHA housing projects that have taken this program, partners from Goodwill, partners from the Urban League. So all different types of community-based organizations, as well as students from NYIT who are masters in energy management, who are enjoying this program and using it to leverage for their careers. And as they go out into the communities and educate business owners, building owners, homeowners, resident owners about the needs for energy efficiency, but also the savings around it, the incentive programs around it, it helps these communities better understand the landscape and have a vested interest in the collective goal that we're all trying to get to, as not only as New York State with our 2050 goals and everything else, but just in the concept of what we're trying to do with climate change. And so it's been an impactful program. The last part we're going to leave you guys with is, this is something that went viral last week, and this was sorry, maybe not last week, maybe within the last few weeks. But Green Girl Leah, that's her hashtag or symbol handle at Instagram, and she put this thing out called Environmentalists for Black Lives Matter. Many people are like, well, what are you talking about? Black Lives Matter is about police brutality, and we got bigger fights on our hands in the environment. You're distorting the movement or changing the message. And she tried to create this understanding of where the two meet. And so she created this concept of what is intersectional environmentalism, and it went very viral. She had thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of likes and views and stuff. And I thought it was very interesting. So she says, what is intersectional environmentalism? This is an inclusive version of environmentalism that advocates for both the protection of people and the planet. It identifies the ways in which injustices happening to marginalized communities and the earth are connected, right? Interconnected, where we're basically putting profits over people, profits over planet all the time, and where we don't have our priorities straight, right? It brings injustices done to the most vulnerable communities and the earth to the forefront, and does not minimize or silence social inequality. Intersectional environmentalism advocates for justice for people and for the planet. And so what she advocated for, and I'll advocate for it as well, is that we all take a pledge. And so I'm not going to ask anybody to come off of mute, so we're not all over talking each other, but if you want to read through the pledge as I read through it, I think there's a lot of power with it. And so the pledge states, I will stand in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and the planet. I will not ignore the intersections of environmentalism and social justice. I will use my privilege to advocate for Black and brown lives in spaces where this message is often silenced. I will proactively do the work to learn about the environmental and social injustices Black, Indigenous, people of color communities face without minimizing. I will respect the boundaries of these community friends and activists and not demand they perform emotional labor or do the work for me. I will share my learnings with other environmentalists and my community. I will amplify the message of Black, Indigenous, people of color activists and environmental leaders, and I will not remain silent during pivotal political and cultural moments that impact these communities. And I thought that was a very powerful pledge. And we are right here in the fight with all of you. We want to see our community strengthen. We want to see economic and social and environmental development on all levels. And we hope that you guys will join us in that fight. So you can contact us at soulfulsynergy.org or any of the contact information you see at the bottom. We're super excited to have Rosa up next. I know Danny's going to do a little intro to her, but she really is the expert in this space, and we wanted to kind of show the kind of justification for her work, right? Where the opportunity is, and then she's going to talk about some of the policy and really where the state is giving the funding to do this work that we need. So thank you all.
All right, thank you, Dwayne. Let me get my screen going. Okay, great. I think Danny was trying to say something.
I think she was too. She's on mute. I don't think she realized she was on mute.
Did everybody hear the introduction in the beginning to Rosa? Because I'm happy to do it again because it wasn't recorded. Up to you. Yeah?
Do it again. We didn't hear it.
Okay. So Rosa Méndez is the director of the Office of Environmental Justice at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or the DEC. In this role, she advances the environmental justice concerns of communities, including ensuring meaningful participation in the agency's permitting process, addressing disproportionate environmental impacts in overburdened communities, and consulting and cooperating with Indian nations sharing common geographic borders with New York State on environmental and cultural resource concerns. Rosa is a graduate of Vermont Law School and earned her BS from Cornell University. And it's my pleasure to introduce you.
All right, thank you, Danny. And thank you to Dwayne and others at Soulful Synergy and Green Business Partnership for including me and giving me this opportunity to speak about the work of DEC and how it relates to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Dwayne and Alejandro did a great job setting the stage and providing that justification for the work that I do and really giving you insight into the experience that some communities are enduring. The scope of my work for DEC involves recognizing and addressing those disparities that they highlighted. So today I'm going to touch on what my office does, give an overview of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the Climate Act, discuss the climate and environmental justice aspects that were included in that legislation, and introduce how everyone on this call and all New Yorkers can get involved and support the work within the Climate Act. DEC has had an environmental justice office since 1999 and an EJ policy since 2003. So you'll see on my slide, I have our definitions in the corner, and these are very similar to the definitions that you heard Dwayne and Alejandro read from the EPA. I've also included 3 of the policies that DEC has that touch on environmental justice and a regulation that is also involved with environmental justice issues. We have 2 big umbrella focus areas. One of those is a broad environmental justice, and the other is Indian Nation affairs. Organizationally, we are part of the agency's executive office, and what this means is it gives us the opportunity to work with every region, every division, and every program that the agency has to implement environmental justice initiatives and oversee the implementation of our environmental justice policy and our Indian Nations Affairs consultation policy. Our current policy makes it the general goal of DEC to promote environmental justice and to incorporate measures that will really achieve environmental justice throughout our work. The bulk of the policy is aimed at the permit process, and it creates an additional obligation for permit applicants when their proposed activity is going to impact an environmental justice area. And we define our environmental justice areas using solely demographic information because of that link and correlation that Dwayne and Alejandro articulately put together of environmental burdens being disproportionately located in those communities. Our Indian Nations consultation policy makes it the established policy of our agencies to conduct any business with Indian nations on a government-to-government basis. It also provides consultation guidelines and directs our staff to pursue cooperative and collaborative agreements with Indian nations to address issues of mutual concern. And this includes environmental and cultural resource issues. Addressing environmental injustices or inequities, I try to organize those in my head around 3 categories. And the first would be process. And this is where Dwayne emphasized representation and collaboration. I would also add the principle of self-determination as one that we follow in my office, that communities and individuals have a right to determine what they are exposed to and what goes on in their communities. This is in the meaningful involvement piece of our definition, meaningful involvement in decisions that affect residents in their communities, their environment, and their health. It also includes access to information. And one of the things we really focus on is how transparent the agency is, how easy it is to get information from us, and that it is presented in a way that provides context so that people living busy lives can understand it when they read it one time and not have to really delve down deep into statistics and other information. Next is procedure, and this is the equal protection under the law that you heard referenced in Dr. Bullard's quote. This includes how legislation is made or regulations, as well as how they are enforced. And finally, distribution, the spatial fairness of where environmental benefits are going, but also where those environmental burdens are located. Where are we using our resources? Who is benefiting from the work that DEC does protecting the environment? Are they equitably distributed? Where are environmental burdens currently located? And importantly, what we do is we work on those systems. We try to see if years of practice are showing us that there are barriers to participation or barriers to accessing the benefits that we provide, and then we correct those. We work with divisions and programs to address all 3 of those categories I mentioned, and we provide training to agency staff and also outside of our agency. And lastly, I'll mention we have a grant program where we support community-based organizations because we find that those are the groups that best understand the environmental issues in their communities and the residents of that community. And we try to support them with various grant opportunities, including our community impact grant program, which is up on the screen. And 2 years ago, we had a green jobs training grant opportunity where we funded community-based organizations to either partner with other entities that do workforce training in the clean energy or other green job spaces, or to provide that training on their own. That was an overview of what we do, and I wanted to touch today on the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, because climate change is one of the environmental justice issues that we focus on. And this act was signed in July of 2019. It has some of the most aggressive climate action target goals in the country, and that includes a 40% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and 85% by 2050. And I want to mention that the act, its goals, and the environmental justice pieces contained within wouldn't have been possible without the tremendous efforts of grassroots organizations and environmental justice advocacy groups who not only pushed to get this legislation passed, but also informed the provisions within. The biggest part of the act that I'll touch on today is the creation of the Climate Action Council. And this is a body co-chaired by DEC and also NYSERDA, with representation from other state agencies and appointed members that were appointed by the governor and the legislature. This 22-member committee will prepare a scoping plan that is going to show how the state will achieve its bold clean energy and climate agenda. The council will also oversee sector-specific advisory panels so that they are getting information from experts for that scoping plan, and also work in consultation with the Climate Justice Working Group that you'll hear about on the next slide, and an Environmental Justice Advisory Group that was created in separate legislation. The Climate Act includes many climate and environmental justice commitments and goals. First, it creates two structures that will help ensure that climate justice and just transition are centered in implementation of the Climate Act. And one of them is the Climate Justice Working Group. This group was announced in June, and they will provide an important advisory role for the Climate Action Council for strategic advice incorporating the needs of disadvantaged communities in the scoping plan. And they will also be establishing the criteria for how to identify these disadvantaged communities. That criteria will include things like pollution burden, socioeconomic information, and also vulnerability to climate change. The Just Transition Working Group will also play an advisory role to the Climate Action Council, and it's going to be focused on workforce development and training. And you heard Dwayne talk about the opportunity that is presented to us as we address climate change in New York. They are also going to especially focus on disadvantaged communities and underrepresented segments of the population. And they will also look at impacts to energy-intensive industries and related trades, and issues related to the closure of electric generating facilities. They're also going to do a study on the number of jobs created to counter climate change, protection of job skills and training that are required to support those jobs, workforce disruption and transition. And all of that is going to be prepared and given to the Climate Action Council. The Climate Action Council will also identify measures that will reduce the emissions of co-pollutants in disadvantaged communities, because largely we're focused on greenhouse gas emission reductions when we talk about climate change, but we also have to understand that there are communities that are experiencing disproportionate burdens to co-pollutants that impact their health, and you heard about that earlier. DEC also has some environmental justice related goals within the Climate Act, and that includes ensuring no increase in co-pollutant emissions or disproportionate burdens on disadvantaged communities, and prioritizing measures that will reduce emissions. And I'll also add that all state agencies have the same goals to implement strategies that will reduce their emissions, and also to consider their actions so that they don't burden or further disadvantaged communities. And in fact, we'll try to benefit those communities. Lastly, DEC will be coordinating with the Climate Justice Working Group to put together a community air monitoring program so that we can really understand the local pollution burdens experienced by some communities, and then prepare strategies to help reduce those emissions. Lastly, this is where the money comes in. The Climate Act provides for investments to disadvantaged communities. Agencies will invest or direct available and relevant programmatic resources in a manner designed to achieve a goal for disadvantaged communities to receive 40% of the overall benefits of that spending. And that includes clean energy and energy efficiency programs, projects or investments in the areas of housing, workforce development, pollution reduction, low-income energy assistance, transportation, and economic development. And those communities should receive no less than 35% of the overall benefits of that spending. Every New Yorker has a key role to play in addressing climate change and protecting communities for a sustainable future. There are many ways for New Yorkers and everyone here to get involved, and all of those opportunities can be found on the climate.ny.gov webpage. Each element of the Climate Act will include a robust public participation aspect, including public hearings and comment periods. For example, the work of the Climate Justice Working Group identifying criteria to identify disadvantaged communities will have at least 6 public hearings regarding those criteria. And the Climate Action Council will hold at least 6 public comment hearings on the draft scoping plan. So I encourage everyone to stay involved, stay connected. When you go to this landing page, you can put your email in and sign up for alerts, and you will get alerted every time there is a new way to participate or a new action for you to be involved in. And that's everything I had here. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And we did get a couple, and Dwayne and Alejandro as well. That was great. Your presentations were really informative. We really appreciate it. We did actually receive a couple questions about the Clean Energy Academy. There seems to be some interest in maybe participating or referring people to participate. So we got a question about how you sign up and when is the next start date for, I guess, the next cohort.
So that's an awesome question, and we're very excited that there's interest. I will say twofold. So as I mentioned, we got funded by NYSERDA 2019 December or so to run the program for 2020. We had 18 months, 16 months I think it actually was, to complete those 120 students, and we did it kind of in record time. And we saw how well the response was for this specific training, that we actually put in for another grant proposal to NYSERDA in April that was just approved about 2 weeks ago. And so we will be able to have funding to do another round, and this makes it free. So it allows us to be able to offer free training to the community and really have them involved. We also submitted one to New York State. We're waiting to hear back, so maybe we'll get both, and maybe there'll be a whole lot more. So this current round of funding, actually, our cohort that is in session is our last one for right now. They will finish out the 120 with this current cohort that's like 26 students. And so we do look to have a next date soon, but it's not determined yet. But it doesn't mean that we still can't craft something with any one of you that's a little bit more specific to your needs. Again, this one is a little energy auditor focused, although it does cover so many different other opportunities in the green industry space. But we're working with one of our other partners who needs more of an installer focus. They need an installer training and kind of like an apprenticeship program or pre-apprenticeship program focused on electrical installation. And so open to having conversations about how we can devise curriculum around the specific needs.
Do you work just in New York State, or what's the region, I guess the regions that you work in?
Where the funding is.
Because I think actually one of the people who asked a question was from Illinois, so maybe
I saw the question. That's why I'm jokingly saying that. But yeah, so NYSERDA obviously keeps relegated predominantly to New York. So the way NYSERDA gets funded is through the SBC charge, and so I think 60% or more of our participants had to be within the areas in which they collect their funding. And so we couldn't go too heavily outside of state, but we did train people from Utah and California and Maryland. Okay. So this current training that's been running through COVID had a lot of participants that were outside of New York. If Illinois is interested in helping us to bring the program there with funding dollars from Illinois, we'd be happy to leverage that training for Illinois.
Thank you. So I actually would encourage anyone with questions for Dwayne, Rosa, or Alejandro just to unmute yourself and ask them. You'll notice in the chat box that Yana did post my colleague Yana posted a link directly to the pledge, an Instagram that Dwayne read. So you can check that out. Also, Dazzle Ekblad, who's from DEC, she posted some information about an upcoming webinar on July 24th. Which is all about the development of a value of carbon guidance for state agencies. Dazzle, is there anything you want to say about that, or I'll just leave it there? That's fine.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to encourage people to check it out and attend. If it's another part of New York State's Climate Act, and it's this Friday. So if people are interested in learning about this, it's also called the social cost of carbon. It's about the value of carbon, and it's a great opportunity to kind of reflect on where we're headed in New York State and offer input to the state agencies about how we think about this issue. Please attend.
Cool, thank you. And Dwayne did drop the URL for the Clean Energy Academy in the chat box. So if you guys want more information about that program, you can just go there and click that.
Absolutely. Application is there as well.
Cool. Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. What time is it? 2:48. Okay, leave some time.
Hey, it's Mike Giordano. How you doing?
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, what's up, Dwayne?
How you doing,
How's it
buddy?
going? Good job, Rosa. I have a question for you guys. It's not really energy related, but I wanted to know, because I'm on my local energy environmental committee, which focuses on energy. It's in Tuckahoe. But we just did a weekend called the summer solstice. It was a little bit late because it happened in June, but one of the areas that I focused on was trash. And when we talk about environmental justice, I guess if there's equality, I think the only thing we have in environmental that's equal is that the trash is everywhere. It was unreal how much trash I found, and especially with masks and gloves and things like that. Do you guys do anything with that for the state too? Because I think that problem, as we address these other issues that you're mentioning, there seems to be a lot of effort on that, which is great. But the whole trash thing seems to be like, I'm talking about street trash. It's getting blown away. Like nobody's really paying attention to it. And it's terrible because that goes into our rivers and then gets into our food chain. So I just wanted to think, I know it's a little off what you guys normally do, but I want to just throw that out there to see if you had any thoughts on that.
I would let that be a Rosa or a GBP question, maybe.
Still on mute, Rosa.
Yeah, I think Rosa's on mute or your headphones stopped.
Mute? How am I now? Good?
Good.
All right. I always forget I have to hit both buttons to unmute. So from DEC's perspective, we do have some, at least from my grant opportunities, some of our funded groups do trash cleanups in neighborhoods, but in general, the kind of trash litter issue kind of falls into the municipal and the municipality space. So, you know, I'm sure you're connected to your municipality area for those kinds of things. But I would encourage you, when next time we open up a round of our grant opportunity, to see if there are community groups that are doing some cleanups in your area using our funding. And they tend to focus on, they've even focused on catching floatables in waterways, because that can be a big issue for our CSO. So there's a lot of interplay there that you can see with our funded programs.
Thank you.
That's why we brought in the big dog.
And
There's
Mike,
gonna be some questions that we can answer, so yeah.
and then Mike, I would say thank you for that question, because again, even though we didn't speak to that point, this always, it reminded me of something we learned about the broken window rule, right? When you walk through a neighborhood and you have a broken window, right, it tends to kind of just become something that is just the norm in that space, and people stop taking care of their space, right? So by you identifying the trash component, it really starts with something like fundamental like that, because then it gives the ownership, right, of the community, and people start taking more ownership in the space. So again, even though we didn't touch upon that point, it's still something that is part of this conversation, because it's incorporating all components of what it is to make a town, a city a healthier place to live for all.
Thank you.
Alejandro, so I, learned about the urban garden that you creating and, bringing in the community to help grow the garden, to help feed people. I mean, why don't you, Green Business Partnership is holistically about sustainability. It's about waste and energy and water, transportation, everything that we're, the big picture. And I was so impressed with what and why you decided to create an urban garden. So I'd love you to share that with everybody.
Thank you. I wish I would have been outside for that. I would have, you know me, I get super excited to show it off. So interestingly enough, again, I think this, and I just seeing Tara here again kind of clicks everything, because it's crazy how working together and collaboration really helps us synergize and really progress, right? So I mentioned Tara because with Tara, we and through WCF, we were able to put a program together at the Guidance Center of Westchester. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful again for the multiple opportunities that WCF and Tara has provided. where we rolled out a construction-based training program, right? And that's where we started working with a young man called Daniel. His name is Daniel Bonet, now the director at Westcop. And as we transition, figuring out different ways on how we could work in New Rochelle, COVID ended up happening, and we ended up volunteering there for probably the end of February, or no, I guess the beginning of March when the first case in New Rochelle hit, all the way through pretty much almost the beginning of June, where we got focused on being able to take to manage the logistics behind picking up the food from Feeding Westchester and bringing it back to Westcott, which was one of the food distribution centers here in New Rochelle. And we also helped deliver food throughout the New Rochelle area, right? So as these things were happening, the numbers started coming in and letting us know that we were moving about 20,000 pounds of produce and food a week, right? And it just dawned on us that, thank God we have a beautiful, such a great organization like Feeding Westchester. But what happens if Feeding Westchester was to close down? What would happen if they had a situation where they couldn't provide this food? And we started discussing the opportunity of saying, hey, why don't we actually just try to see if we could start growing food here locally? And what we embarked on with Westcop, the housing authority here in New Rochelle, is putting together a program on how we're actually going to be growing food here in New Rochelle and utilize that same food to help feed those in need during these hard times, right? And usually we really want to be able to help alleviate these food deserts, right? We may have, people in these underserved communities may have access to food, but not necessarily access to healthy food. And that's another point that we're really trying to combat there. And lastly is creating workforce development programs around this, right? Because we're looking on ways on how we can incorporate the construction and carpentry component of what we teach, and also again incorporate the urban farming. And this is again coupled with understanding that in New York City we have the new local laws of needing to green to make our roofs green, new developments and make our roofs green or provide renewable energy sources, right? Again, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to where the opportunities are coming down from. And I'll leave this with this last point of this, is that one of the things we like to utilize is the concept that we learned from Wayne Gretzky, right? Wayne Gretzky once was asked, why were you so great in playing hockey? And he said, while everybody else was chasing the puck, I was always going to be where the puck was going to be, right? And understanding that a lot of the opportunities people take advantage of here, and specifically in Westchester, our communities getting jobs in New York City, you always try to make sure that we're aligned with these things that are coming down the pipeline. So Danny, thank you for letting me speak to this, because it's something that we're extremely excited about. And I didn't mention, we're also about to add talking to a cook that wants to help get involved in this space and create a workforce development program around cooking using the same vegetables that we're actually growing, due to the fact that we were also donating cooked food to hospitals and some other living homes. So,
well, man, that's a grant opportunity if I ever heard one for the funders on the call. That's like absolutely a home run.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you shared that with us.
Excited, super excited.
So it's been wonderful. Anybody have any last comments or questions, or inspired to take a look in the mirror and see what we could all do?
Yes, this is Dwayne Kennan out of Brownsville, Brooklyn, DRK. Dwayne and Alex, good to see you guys. Great presentation. I just wanted to say, speaking of a grant opportunity, what you shared, we have in Brownsville times 20. We have community gardens, we have park renovations that are happening that are connected to $100 million affordable housing initiatives. So I'm really excited about having continued conversations with you guys and see if you can replicate some of the things that you've done in Westchester and other places in Brownsville. I'm excited
to see you on the call, man. You're a hard man to reach. I know you've been down south for a bit. Great to see you, man.
Good deal.
Very excited to have you. So yes, that is something we're going to be coming to Brownsville to do. And even right before COVID happened, we were planning to get a lot of the Brownsville community to be able to take this training, because this is, again, where we want to really be able to have the community members participate in the economic development and advancement that Rosa spoke to. Why we were so happy to have Rosa or somebody to represent the CLCPA is you saw that 40% of money going into disadvantaged communities. We need to make sure that we have a seat at the table. a vested interest, not only in the advancements and the energy efficiency components, but in the economic advancements that are coming from these investments from New York State. And so that's a big part of why we're excited to have this conversation today, is that it crosses across so many different lines. And so thank you all for having us. Thank you. I hope it was a valuable conversation. We really enjoyed it, and we really appreciate it.
I want the conversation to be continued, and we want to continue to explore with you, how can our businesses get involved? I've definitely been promoting your events, but, would love to really go deeper and see what we could do together and just keep exploring. And thank you for your leadership. And just really, you guys are amazing. You just seized the moment and rolled up your sleeves and got out there and started feeding people and got out there and started protesting, and just nothing seems to stop you. And it's really very inspiring and impressive. So can't thank you enough. Thank you, Rosa. That was great. Great to have a connection to the state. And we're going to share all the links and all the video and these presentations with everybody who was on this call, and we'll post it onto our website to make sure that everybody has access to the information. And this is just the beginning of a conversation.
Thank you so much. Can I give one shout out while we're here?
Sure.
So I don't know if Antoine is still on the call, but our good friend Antoine that he mentioned with Evolution One, he's now a program manager at Wildan. And so we've been running this training program with Wildan for the last several months, but when COVID hit, they allowed us to use vans that they had sitting, because nobody could do any construction work, any installation work. So they had vans sitting in their parking lot that they allowed us at Soulful Synergy to operate as the liaisons to get to community organizations that need it. So Westcop had a van that they were helping move those 20,000 pounds that he mentioned. We were also able to get vans to Salvation Armies in Staten Island, in Queens, and in Harlem. And so they really stepped up, and that was really cool. So one shout out, we do this work because we're excited about it, but we have a lot of people that support, how we're moving forward. So thank you for everybody that is a part of the team.
Absolutely.
And we see some of the students on the call too, which is cool. Safwan, I see you, RL. A lot of the students that took our program over the last few months. So it's been great to have.
Yeah, you got some shout outs on the chat about that. So it's really nice.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
All right. So this has been awesome. And again, we're just going to continue the conversation.
Hey,
so great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.